Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the new college football playoff format and the possible changes that might be coming to that in the coming years because it changed pretty quickly on us before the season even started. Um, but we'll go from one change to all of the changes that could be happening. There is so much stuff happening across the sport, so many different things changing and evolving as we speak right now. There's stuff changing in this sport, but before we get into all of that, I do want to remind you all we do get questions throughout the show, and I would love to see them obviously come across my screen. So the best way to do that is to use the link at the bottom of the screen, streamelements.com/GSMC sports network, dot/tip. It's super helpful not only to us here at the network, but super helpful to you all to ask a question and see it come across the screen, and maybe we can get into a little back and forth here. So definitely use that if you'd like to ask a question. But let's talk about changes in college football. I've been doing live streams for the last couple of days, and I've realized 90% of what I'm talking about is something that either didn't exist 5 years ago or wasn't a big part of the sport or is just going to change in 2024, whether that's coaching or conference realignment or everything else. So I thought this would be a good time to give you a one-stop shop. This 15-minute segment where you can come and see a ton of the changes that are happening now. I wish I could tell you that I got into everything, but couldn't possibly do that. I'll be totally honest. There are too many things happening across conference realignment, coaching changes, which this coaching cycle might have been one of the craziest we've had. I mean, 2021 was particularly wild with Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly moving between two big schools in themselves, but the sheer amount of moves that have happened in this cycle have been absolutely insane. So we'll get into all that. And then the transfer portal, the thing that never sleeps, the thing that we not many people are too fond of, but it's the reality of the sport. So I will try to break down a couple of the big names. I got 5 names today. This will definitely be a reoccurring thing, new same name, new places type of thing, because there are so many guys going different places. And then a couple of rule changes that might be in store for the 2024 or even going forward in this sport. So it'll be very interesting to see all of this stuff unfold. But let's start with conference realignment because it is the thing that tends to make the people most upset. Let's get it over with, get it out of the way real quick. Tons of stuff has happened since Texas and OU made their decision to go to the SEC. That was obviously kind of the first step in this, crazy new world we live in college football. And that is officially coming into effect in the 2024 season. Both teams coming into the SEC, kind of riding high after last year. Obviously, Texas coming off a playoff run, 12-2 season, Big 12 championship. OU improved dramatically in the 2023 season with a 10-2 record after a 6-7 year one under Brent Venables. But I like both these teams are going into a league that is obviously going to be much tougher week in and week out. So we'll see how they react to that. But definitely were the teams that started all this craziness, right? And then they were pretty quickly followed up. Obviously, it took about a year for all of this to coalesce, and it all came out last offseason. But I'm sure there were people working at the Pac 12 very quickly after the news dropped around Texas and Oklahoma. I talked about in the last segment that Oregon State and Washington State are all alone in the Pacific Northwest over there, and they will be playing mostly Mountain West teams this next year. And it'll be very interesting to see just how all of that works, right? It's not necessarily something we've seen two teams just standing alone being their own conference. Obviously, you have independent teams that play a ton of different opponents, and maybe we'll have a segment in the coming days about what Notre Dame looks like in the future of college football because there's a lot of question about where they fit into all this craziness. But for the Pac 12, I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to argue that you deserve the same shake of a Big 12 or an ACC or Even, someone like the Sun Belt, who has 14 teams and has, set up this structure where Oregon State and Washington State are kind of figuring it out on the fly. Obviously, a new commissioner in there, Teresa Gould, the first female commissioner of the Power Five. I mean, if you want to call it a Power Five now, but still a remarkable accomplishment for not only her, but for the conference. And that is it in the Pac-12 right now. Oregon State and Washington State just kind of hanging out, doing their own thing, playing Mountain West teams. And then obviously you have Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA heading to the Big Ten. Those are the biggest losses for this conference, I think, by a fairly comfortable margin. Oregon is building into something that is going to have to be reckoned with in the coming years. Dan Lanning knows exactly what he's doing. The roadmap seems very simple to me and seems like he's executing it to perfection so far. Obviously, not the year that they wanted last year, but they've reloaded and they're going to be ready to roll into the Big Ten, and we'll see how they react to all that. As for Washington and USC and UCLA, they're kind of in a different type of boat, sort of. I'm not necessarily as confident that they're going to come in and just jump in and roll over the conference. I think Oregon will be right up there among the top teams in the conference, but I think the rest of these teams will kind of struggle to start, if I'm being honest. Washington has lost a ton, USC kind of the same, and UCLA is just not at a point as a program where I think they can compete week in, week out against some of the teams that they're going to have to. Now, I really do like this UCLA team. We'll get into a coaching hire that they had to make here in a second. But it's no secret that the LA market means a ton to whatever conference has it. And for the past, however long, the Pac-12 has been able to kind of lean on that, whether it's, when USC was the belle of the ball, when they were the team to watch, the amount of money that they were bringing in for that conference was just ridiculous. I'll be totally honest. And now, Oregon took over the reins for a little bit there with, all the different uniforms and all the different changes going on. They had Chip Kelly in town that recently got let go, or didn't get let go, left UCLA with a lot of quotations there. But basically, these four teams are just huge blows to the Pac-12. Going into the future, these felt like the four teams that, you would want if you were someone, and the Big Ten was able to get them all. So huge props to them. Obviously, not the greatest for the Pac-12, but that was not where the casualty ended. Stanford, SMU, and Cal are heading to the ACC, which is a huge change, obviously. Not necessarily the biggest hit to the conference. SMU not in the Pac-12, obviously. But something to keep an eye on. The ACC has 17 teams, which feels very clunky, but we'll see how that unfolds. Arizona State, and Colorado and Utah heading to the Big 12. Tons of teams that could make some noise. Colorado, Arizona, Utah, and Arizona State in a couple of years, I think, could all be very big players in that conference. And then we talked about Texas OU to the SEC. And then finally, the only change at the lower level between last year and this year was Kennesaw State jumping up to the FBS and joining the Conference USA. A very good team at the FCS level the last couple of years. They will have to, do that 2 years that JMU had to do where they can't play in postseason. But very cool to see more teams kind of making that jump from the FCS level to the FBS level. But now let's get into head coaching hires. This is going to be a little bit more rapid fire because, man, there are a ton of them. But a couple that really stood out to me throughout this cycle, and I broke down some good coaching hires on last show, not only head coaches, but coordinators and such, if you would like to check that out. But the head coaches are all over the place. Deshaun Foster was hired at UCLA after Chip Kelly left for Ohio State. A former player at UCLA, I think a huge energy guy. I'm very excited to see what he can build in LA. And then we had Willie Fritz take over for Dana Holgorsen at Houston. He's coming from Tulane. He had a chance, it sounded like a year ago, to take the Georgia Tech job, decided to go away from that and go towards the Houston job. and he can do a ton in that city if you just recruit that city. The amount of talent in that place is insane. So very interested to see what he can build. Very, very good coach. Jeff Levy finding his way over to Starkville, Mississippi. He was the OC at Oklahoma a year ago, and it will bring back kind of what that Mike Leach era had, right? That fast offense that's going to wear you out, throw the ball a lot, and have some fun. So excited to see what that looks like in Starkville. Brett Brennan takes over at Arizona, which is a huge deal because Jed Fish obviously moved on to Washington, which is another head coach here, and then Mike Elko taking over at Texas A&M was one of the coaches that I really love the hire. I think he fits there perfectly, even though I don't necessarily love the term fit too much. I think it just makes sense for him to be the Aggies head coach. And then we had Jonathan Smith going to Michigan State from Oregon State. This felt like years ago, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, so much stuff has happened since he has departed to East Lansing, and man, it's crazy. I saw that come across my screen when I was trying to figure out who I wanted to cover, and I had totally forgotten about that one. I'll be totally honest. And then finally, one that I really love, who took over for Willie Fritz in Tulane, is John Summerall. He came over from Troy, has done really incredible things there the last couple of years, and very excited to see what he can do. As I said, that's not even half of what we have, so this is definitely something that we will revisit, but just kind of to give you an idea of some of the crazy changes. Obviously, Nick Saban retiring, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, Jim Harbaugh leaving, Sharon Moore at Michigan. I felt like I didn't need to say those because those are all over the place, but those are some other names that have changed places and some players that have changed places. I have 5 guys that are really, really important to not only their team, but college football as a whole going into next year. And let's start with DJ Uiagalelei, the new face of the Florida State program. And I love this fit for him, not only from a schematic standpoint. I think Alex Atkins is just an incredible fit for him, but also I think he fits into that program. Mike Norvell obviously really values young men that have a great head on their shoulders. We saw Jordan Travis handle himself with as much grace as you possibly could in a situation that was really, really tough for him. So I think he fits in perfectly there. Another guy that I think fits in perfectly is Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, taking over for another veteran guy that's played a lot of football, that has, plays with his head and makes all the right decisions in Bo Nix. And it just made total sense when he decided to go to Oregon, and excited to see what he can do there. Quinshon Judkins, we've talked about a little bit, a running back that went from Ole Miss to Ohio State. One that really surprised me. There some people that thought NIL played a big role. I'm not sure about all that, but obviously a huge addition for the Buckeyes, and another huge addition for them was Caleb Downs. I've talked about it a couple of different times. I love this kid. He is just so good. He plays so instinctively. He is so fast, and he led Alabama in tackles as a freshman, which I don't think anyone's done since about the 1970s. So just to put into context about how crazy he was, and one of his teammates from a year ago, Isaiah Bond, has made his way to Texas. Someone who I think is going to be a huge part of that passing attack, could very easily be wide receiver 1 for Texas next year, even though I think it's going to be a lot of spreading the ball around. But Isaiah Bond did not have a drop the entirety of last year, so a sure-handed guy that you're bringing in for a passer of the football in Quinn Ewers that's as good as there is in the country. So a lot to look forward there for Texas fans. And then we have some rule changes. Obviously, that's not the last time we will talk about transfer portal guys, because, Lord, there is so many. But possible rule changes going into the 2024 season. One of the big things that has been talked about for ever since the Michigan stuff came out, really, was the in-helmet communication. It is possibly coming. There are a lot of people pushing for that. Some not as excited about that, but I'm a big fan personally. I think it just makes the most sense. They do it a ton at the NFL level. And it will make everything much more efficient. It would make everything a little bit more streamlined, and obviously it would take out that chance for signal callers to be, caught and be stolen and create a whole big problem for a ton of different people. But another one coming is officials are apparently pushing to add the 2 minute warning to college football. Obviously, in 2023, we had the running clock until under 2 minutes, which is an NFL rule that has made its way down to college football. This is another one that they would like to add in. I'm not necessarily quite as big a fan of this one. I don't necessarily think it'll hurt much, if I'm being totally honest. But I like the subtle differences between the two levels, so I'd prefer to keep that one the same, but I think no harm, no foul for that one. And then just kind of a scheduling hiccup going into this new craziness around college football with all of the conference realignment and all of the different number of teams in different conferences and different scheduling models. The Big Ten is currently set to play home and aways against every single team every 5 years. So that would mean, playing Oregon would play absolutely every single team at home, would play absolutely every single team away, at least in the span of the 5 years. The ACC, on the other hand, specific teams might not play each other for 7 years, which is just insane. I think it's another reason we need uniform scheduling in the sport, because it just doesn't make any sense that these teams would not be matching up more often, and we wouldn't be using these bigger conferences to see more different matchups that we haven't seen in the past. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. But that's all I got, at least for today. There is still plenty that is new in college football, and I probably will be coming back with this segment down the road. But for right now, that's all I got. But we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we are going to talk about some of the most pressured individuals going into the 2024 season. Some of them are obvious, some aren't quite as obvious, but we got a couple for you in the next segment, so stick around, and we will be right back.